I'm Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Angela.
We are the Ink Mages. Join us as we discuss all things fantasy, world building, storycraft, myths and legends, and of course, our own imaginative stories. Welcome to the Ink Mages podcast. We are so excited that you have joined us today. On our last writing craft episode, we talked 7 tips on infusing tension into your story. So today we are going to be talking about mastering micro-tension. So before you dive into this episode with us, if you haven't watched the other tension episode, I highly suggest that you watch that one because it will go through all the big tips on adding the big important parts of tension into your story. This one is kind of the nitty-gritty of adding micro-tension. So we're going to dive in and discuss what that really is. Micro-tension is the moment-by-moment tension that keeps the reader in a constant state of suspense over what will happen, not in the story, but in the next few seconds.
Which I have to actually say that micro-tension to me is just as important as the tension overall throughout your story, because this is the page-turning kind of tension that makes people stay engaged with the story.
Funny thing, sometimes when I'm reading a book, it's almost like the tension is so thick that I have to like cover the bottom of the page because I don't want to accidentally jump ahead and see like what's going to happen. I'm like, no, oh no. So I have to like save myself, like, oh, if a reveal's coming, I'm like, who, when authors are doing that, they are succeeding with micro-tension. So micro-tension is achieved on a line-by-line basis, as opposed to big plot twists, surprises. That's macro-tension, which is what we discussed in our previous episode. Micro-tension is created by the element of surprise. When readers are surprised by the action in the scene, the reaction of characters, or their own emotional reactions, that is successful micro-tension at work. So another way micro-tension is created is when things feel off, feel contradictory, seem puzzling. So that's kind of the big takeaway for micro-tension is we're going to be saying the words contradictory, contradiction, conflict. That's tension in a nutshell. So if you hear that a lot, just think when you're writing, putting tension in a story, when things are opposing, they're opposites, that's when you know you've got tension. So anytime a character has conflicting feelings, you have micro-tension. It could be small, simmering, it could be subtext and subtle. So find ways to add conflicted emotions to create dissonance.
Yeah, and I was just talking to Stephanie before we got started, the importance of micro-tension, and we're going to be breaking this down as we go, is that you're actually humanizing your character as well. Because in real life, the kind of contradictions and tensions that we have in our own internal thoughts and what we say is so real to life, and it really brings your characters to life.
Yes, I think I saw, like, it wasn't a meme, but it was somewhere online where an author had said, if you want to have compelling characters, you need to make them contradictory. Because in real life, as Angela just said, humans are walking contradictions. We'll think one thing, but say the other. Our body language will convey something, and our words are saying the complete opposite. So when you have your characters doing that, then they feel real to the reader.
Yes.
It's just... So I have a few tips on how to add contradiction in different ways. And so for the first one, we're going to be breaking down how to add contradiction in your character. So dig deeper into your character and find inside him or her contradictions, dilemmas, opposing impulses, and clashing ideas that keep us in suspense. Include character inner conflict about what's happening right now in the scene in the moment. Inner conflict can be shown with contradictory thoughts, words, and or examples or actions. So for example, show a character acting in a way that contradicts his desires. So in the Ghost Gambit, I do this a lot with Acheron. Guy's my favorite in that book. Sorry, Rowan, but he gave me a lot to work with.
Yes, he's a very fun character.
So much of what is happening is his relationship with Mara is kind of building, but like he doesn't want to react. He doesn't want to give into his impulses. And so he's kind of keeps throwing up walls. But like internally, we as the reader know that he's falling for her, but like in reality, he like doesn't want to show that he's doing that. So I get a lot of internal exposition of him warring with himself and this desire to not give in to his impulses. So this is constantly happening through action and how he's responds to her and his exposition, his internal thoughts. So it's like line by line, this is all happening. So it's creating lots and lots of microtension. And so I went deep here with him, and it was really funny because I wanted him to like give in. I was like, okay, it's time for a good moment with Mara. You need to give in. And he does. And I was like, yay, applaud. And then he instantly, like this next chapter, it's like, oh, he just second guessed everything. I'm like, what do you mean you just second guessed everything? Like, why? And then it's like, I just imagined him. I could see him folding his arms, and he's like, I have trust issues and commitment issues. I'm like, you what? I was like, oh, you do. That's great. I was like, you so do. Let's pull this back. Why do you have commitment and trust issues? And then he tells me something his uncle says. And I'm like, bingo, that's gold. I can use it. We can dial this back. And yay, I got all this microtension because of it. To really like find the nitty gritty of the emotions, the contradictory emotions that are happening with your character.
Well, and this really is you allowing your character to develop. This is you getting to know your character. I mean, I think we've talked about this several times, how when you're writing and your characters kind of take over and they start telling you, actually, I don't feel that way. Or actually, this is, and it happens as you're writing. And that's you really connecting with your character. I remember when I first started writing, and I was writing Eleanor in the Song of the Bard, and I was writing Eleanor, she felt really flat because I knew as the writer that she was a people pleaser. So she was kind of bending and doing things and being very compliant and not coming across very alive to the audience, just really flat and uninteresting. And that's where these internal conflicts really come in, because I wanted her to be a people pleaser. But how many of us are just people pleasers and we're okay with it? On the inside, we're having a lot of internal conflict. And this is where I was able to really come in and make Eleanor come alive and also bring tension to my story and help people fall in love with her, understanding, oh, these are her conflicts. And this is also the pull to change, which we want for our characters to have, right? They're going through this whole, throughout the whole story, they're changing or they're reaching a goal. This happens through internal conflict. This happens as their minds are changing and they haven't even come into agreement with the change yet. They're fighting against it. They're resisting it because of whatever is going on inside of them. And it's to me, the bright spots in the story is this right here. Even Stephanie was talking about Acheron. I love him and the scenes that she wrote for him, especially in this current book that she is working on. They are the best. Like they're my favorite parts of the whole book, just being able to get into that internal space of the character's change and his resistance to change. And yet that bend that's kind of happening without his permission. It's great.
Thank you. And it's awesome with Eleanor that the way that she behaves. So like what is being seen outward is at conflict with what's internal. So, for introverts like me, oftentimes we will behave a certain way, but we're thinking the other thing. And so what ends it's happening is a blow up, you know? And so that's where eventually we'll talk about microtension in dialogue, but that's where if something has been simmering for like a whole book, maybe and then in the next book, it kind of blows up. And I know that happens with Eleanor and a certain character in Angela's third book. Like they started simmering midway through second book, and then like third book, it just hits. And it's like, okay, it just all spews out. We have a wonderful explosive chapter. Dialogue. And I'm sure Angela will touch on that when we get to that point. So show your character doubting, hoping for, or fearing something that may or may not happen in the story's future. Have your character misinterpret their own emotions. So this one's fun.
Yeah.
So they'll eventually have that paradigm shift of, oh my gosh, that's what's really bothering me, or that's why I'm behaving the way I'm behaving. And that might come through dialogue where someone calls them out on their behavior. Show this by having them assume they feel one way and then have them react and deal with their thoughts and experiences in a way that's contrary to their assumptions and reveals their true emotions. And back to Akron, it comes to a place where he like openly admits, oh my God, I am in conflict. I am a paradox.
Yes.
And to have him finally admit it is just hilarious. But also like, yay, this is a turning point for you.
Yeah.
And now we can like move forward and have you deal with something else.
Yes. And I like, even with the character that I'm writing right now, my character is believing a lie about himself throughout the entire story. So he's wrong. And the reader knows it. We're like, no, please stop. Like the whole time. So the tension, even for the reader, is like, stop believing that lie. It's not true. It's destructive. It's causing all kinds of havoc in your life. That doesn't have to happen if you just knew what the truth was. And so there's that micro tension of even inside the character's mind where he's continuing to go, this is all my fault. I am the curse. I am blah, blah, all of the things. And you're just the whole time waiting for his mind to change, waiting for that. That's definitely a good way to add tension because again, you've got, even in real life, you've got people, we don't know our own minds a lot of the time. And we are being forced into change, good change, hopefully for most people. But that's a really good way to draw in that tension, is that lie that your character's believing from the get-go. And there's probably a lot of good reasons for that lie. And so you're hoping, how is he going to eventually change his mind? How is that going to happen? What kind of pressures or people is he going to meet that's going to help his mind start to change?
Yeah, and it keeps the readers invested and in suspense, and that hopefully, like, since Angela's building that with the character, that there will be a payoff. There will be that moment of that lie will break off, or hopefully in a wonderful dialogue exchange where maybe he's very resistant to a person who might be giving him some truth. I'm excited. I can't wait to read this one. Give your character uncertainty or disbelief about what is happening in the moment. You can also have them think negatively about the past, intermingled with positivity about what's happening in the present, or vice versa. You can also intermingle emotional thoughts about the present when an opposite thought, hope, or fear for the future. In The Conjurer's Curse, I feel like I did this a lot with Rowan, where he so berates himself on the negative aspects of his curse killing his guardian mothers. And so he's a little bit hesitant to be positive about the future. And so there are times where in the present he's trying to be hopeful, but like the past just weighs so heavily on him. So it's hard to grasp at that future hope because the present has just been awful. So he kind of thinks he may just be stuck in that negativity. All right, so here's the fun one. We've gotten to dialogue. Emphasize contradiction. Yay! In dialogue. So microtension in dialogue comes from conflict between the talkers and or from inner conflict from the POV character, from one character's reluctance to accept something about the exchange, the words, or the other character. When you are writing dialogue, it's good not to be straightforward with your dialogue. The best exchanges will be when one person is coming in with their own thoughts and opinions and view of what they think should happen, and another character might have the opposite view. Think they should do something different. So you'll have conflict because they're going to be opposing each other. And then let's say a side character is kind of bringing heavy the truth on what your main character needs to hear, but they're reluctant to accept. Don't just let it be, it's said one time and instantly it's like, okay, I accept it. I believe you. No, like it should be almost the entire scene, almost the entire dialogue through of them like, no, being resistant, I always say it's like 2 or 3, the 2 or 3 rule. Like it should be like the third time it's kind of like pressed that
Yes.
maybe they'll start to accept. If it's
Yeah.
the first time, it's like, okay, well I guess we're moving on now. That was quick. So let it simmer. Let your character be resistant for a bit.
Which was a hard thing for me to learn at the beginning of writing. As somebody told me, write dangerously. And it's true, even in the dialogue, you want to write dangerously. Don't let things resolve too quickly. And I think I've shared this example before, but I think it was probably the scene that I learned the most from was in book 1, you have Merlin returning to a kingdom that's been falling apart that he kind of abandoned. He was going to be the one to probably be the glue to hold it together. And he was like, nope, Arthur's dead. I'm grieved. I'm not coming back. And a tie out. Yeah. And he comes back. And the first time I wrote this scene, there was kind of like, oh, maybe a little tension with the characters, like, where have you been? But they were very forgiving. Like, we're just glad you're back. And I had somebody read that scene and they're like, really? Let's really make this scene like dangerous and really help the reader sink their teeth into the situation, because would they be so forgiving? And I had to recreate the scene where, like, no, they were angry. They were not happy to see him. Well, they were happy, relieved, the tension of like relief and anger and
contradiction right there.
Yes.
Got it.
Not ready to forgive. And the dialogue became really fierce and resistant. And the inner dialogue of a Merlin going, oh my gosh, this is what I feared would happen. And, you know, all the way down to him getting smacked across the face. And it became one of my favorite scenes of the book because there was so much good tension. And it really brought people into the direness of the story and where the kingdom starts out right from the get-go.
That's a perfect example for the next thing I was going to say is building tension depends on the artful teasing out of hostilities between the talkers. So it's not that like Guinevere wanted to like seriously hurt Merlin, but like she had been hurt from him abandoning everyone. So that hurt is going to manifest in probably some harsh words that need to be exchanged, and like Merlin needs to hear it. So that, and then we get a deeper understanding and appreciation too of, you know, the characters in that moment. Okay, so remember, this is a big one. Characters can have contradictory or just different shades of moral codes, opinions, desires, needs, wishes, perceptions, interpretations about everything, who, what, when, where, why, any given situation. Goals, priorities, topics they want to talk about or don't want to talk about. So it's like anytime there's a scene with more than one character, you have the potential for contradictory, opposing viewpoints.
Yes.
And it's wonderful to play off of it. Some of my favorite things to write is the dialogue between Rowan and Akron, my two brothers, because they have vastly different moral codes, vastly different interpretations about the world around them. You know, one's a little bit more aggressive and hate-centered, vengeful. The other one wants to do what's right, even when it's hard, integrous. So it means even if they're united on something, they're going to have vastly different approaches. So wonderful micro-tension in their dialogue.
Frodo and Boromir are a great classic example of this. You've got a team working together, and Boromir thinks, like, what are we doing? Why are we doing it this way?
Let's use this ring.
Yes, exactly.
Why not use it?
Yes. And of course, then it gives us tension because you're like, Boromir, please don't make a bad decision. And, you know, all of those.
We love you, please.
Yes, please just, you know, come to your senses and don't, you know, of course, the ring ultimately, you know, corrupts him. And so it isn't entirely his fault, but his opinion helped sway that and allow that to happen. But yeah, really good tension and different beliefs between characters who are on the same side.
Exactly. You put 9 people together in a fellowship. You got a couple jolly hobbits, little mischief makers, an elf and a dwarf who obviously don't get along, and there's reasons for that. A wizard who's trying to keep everybody on the same page. And then your lone ranger who's like, yes, it's a wonderful warrior, but very soft-spoken. And so not necessarily ready to lead the charge until the wizard is not there to get everybody in line. So much conflict. Great. Okay, make one character uncertain about or suspicious of the other character. Oh, when you're suspicious of their intentions, that can lead to tense moments, just misunderstandings. Put one character on the defensive, even if it doesn't seem provoked, or have one on the offensive, being aggressive, even when it doesn't seem necessary. I do that with Akron a lot. And then in my Heartsmith book, I have my character Aaron gets a little bit like defensive when he thinks that Sasha is kind of getting a little too pushy with her journalistic need to know the truth. And it's like, I am not a story, like back off, and gets defensive, even though it wasn't necessarily called for. But like our reactions, if we feel that we're getting threatened, it's just like being a rat in a cage or like, a fox in their hole. If they feel like they're being defensive, we are gonna, if we feel like we're getting threatened, we're gonna get defensive and lash out. And then of course, things unravel. And of course, we're gonna get to some wonderful revelations, possibly deepening connections between characters. Yeah, all good stuff. Have characters push each other's buttons.
Yes, let's go. Love this one.
Bonus if you can delay the reason for what that the button is. So if you don't, especially if it's like the beginning of the story and like a character is like, that's a trigger word, but maybe we don't know why. And then it gets revealed a little later. Build suspense. All right. And make a character's dialogue contrary to their goals, thoughts, body language. And I feel like we touched on it a little bit, but you can show how well characters know each other. Like if it's a romantic relationship, like Han and Leia, or with my character's Rowan and Tahira, one character can say something and it's like you just look at them. No, your body language is saying the opposite. So that's not the truth.
Yes. Well, this can even be shown in romantic relationships where one person is being pulled toward the other, but they don't want to be in relationship, but they can't stop themselves. The magnetism is there and they're like, no, I don't want this.
I won't give in.
I won't give in. And then of course it, amps up the slow burn.
All right, we're moving on to emphasize contradiction in action. Now, tension in action comes not from the action itself, but from inside the point of view character experiencing it. This is so important because as an editor, I sometimes read manuscripts where actions are almost just being listed. Like, the full paragraph of just some chaotic thing happening. And I'm like, okay, someone just got poisoned. What is the character thinking right now? Like things are going on and she's just standing there? Like, is she afraid? Is she scared? Like, give me something.
Yes.
Because it will feel flat if all you are doing is describing, maybe in good description visuals, an action that's happening, but it's like it will mean nothing if the character is not reacting to it. So describe action in a way that suggests, echoes, foreshadows sinister things to come. So I do that in the beginning of The Race of Arjun. My villain, Anson, threatens Rowan right in the beginning. And it's a wonderful foreshadow because it's like, you've just, stopped me from my pursuits. So don't think that this isn't going to have consequences.
Yes.
Foreshadow. We don't know what that's going to look like, but this is, the tension will build and eventually there will be a conflict.
Yes.
So you can tease things early. And when you do, just make sure that you deliver. There's the actual payoff for it.
Well, and this can really play out well when you have a character say something and the other character agrees, but their action that you describe is that their face, though, communicated that they didn't agree. So they're reluctantly agreeing, but there's this reaction. So you're describing in the actions that there was an opposite, something going on in the other character's brain. We don't know what it was, but it creates tension because we know something might come of this because they're not really in agreement. And it adds to that, they're not really on the same team on this.
Don't just show action. Show or reveal the point of view character's emotions about the action, about the fact that it's actually happening and what it might mean. It's kind of what I was sharing earlier. Like, it sounds funny. Don't just show the action, huh? Like, it
Yeah.
all has to depend on how the character is viewing it, what it's pulling out of them emotion wise. So off sometimes as an editor, I'll be like, okay, what is your character feeling right now? Like, add a metaphor. Give me a metaphor for like the fear that they are feeling. Because I don't want to just hear she felt fearful.
Showing and telling,
No,
another episode, but this is important.
yep,
Pay attention.
exactly. So use a metaphor to like really dig deep into what the character is experiencing as this terrible action is unfolding. You can also use the point of view character's inner conflict by showing maybe self-reproach in this moment, like, I just failed big time. An action just happened and I didn't stop it.
Yes.
So instantly there's that inner conflict, and then they might react because of that. They feel like they missed the mark, so now they got to like overcompensate. So maybe they feel self-reproach about something they're about to do or they weren't able to do. You can add external cues from other characters that suggest the main character is doing the opposite of what he should be doing. Big blow up can happen in that moment. So take home this is that action, when described in only visual terms, feels flat.
Yeah.
Emotions are needed to give action force and power.
I like to think I get really I'm kind of a social introvert, so I do like to be around people, but I'm very introverted. And so when I read stories where whatever the hero has done has caused people to not like them or be leery of them, like crowds of people. You know, the example of this is when Harry Potter is accused of being the villain and all of the school basically believes it. And then Harry has to enter into a room of people looking at him, leering at him. That those scenes make me so uncomfortable. I turn inside out because I'm like, oh my gosh, like I would rather go. Instead of entering the room, if I were Harry, I'd rather go run to my room and never be around people again. But he goes in, and that tension for me is very gripping whenever there is that kind of result of the decisions they're making. I even feel this way when you've got really strong characters who purposely buck the crowd and cause the crowd to react negatively towards them. That totally gets me with tension. And you see that reaction, that action from the description of the crowd. Maybe they're entering in or the character's going to make a choice. And you know that this is going to have effect as to how people see them. And you always want everyone to be like, yay, we love the hero. But that isn't always the case in a story that the whole community, you know, Spider-Man's a good example of that, right? You know, you got Spider-Man who's trying to save the world, but, you know, the news is saying he's a villain. And so everyone starts to hate him. And that kind of tension is so great. And those can be little, again, micro tensions because of just the reaction or one little thing that's said that can be communicated in the story.
So, want to know a scene from Lord of the Rings, Return of the King that I simply must skip because the tension is too much that it like hurts me. And it was in the movie, but it did not play out this way in the book. But it's when Frodo believes Gollum that Sam had eaten the lembas and like,
oh my gosh, I
can't
that scene. I was like,
I want to throttle literally because I love Sam. I like adore Sam. And he's just like breaking. He's crying that like Frodo believes that sneaky little gangly creature.
I remember when I first
I can't. The tension is too much. It's it's just no. Like the hero is doing what he should not be doing, and that's listening to that evil voice.
I wanted to shout when that scene happened the first time I saw it. So I was like, oh, this never happens in the book. Exactly. I was like, no. And yet,
Frodo.
Yes. The tension was excellent for the movie version. I mean,
Yes.
we could talk about, books to movies at another time, but there is a different way you have to bring in tension in movies than when you read a book.
Yes.
And it was an excellent way of bringing in that tension that made people go, "Ugh," especially even people who'd read the book. So they think they know what's going
Yes.
to happen next. And nope, surprise, surprise, this horrible
Because
scene unfolds.
Frodo and Sam have been like this the whole time. And then like Gollum was able to divide their friendship.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
like, no. So yeah, can't watch it.
No,
It's too
no,
much.
it is. It's too much.
All right. The last one we're going to touch on is emphasize contradiction in backstory. Make your character anything but neutral about their past. They can be
Mm,
regretful, doubtful, overconfident. Just stay away from neutrality.
yeah.
Like there should be a reason, there should be a conflict that is in their backstory that they were not okay with things.
Yes.
Give character long desired things and still no way, even now in the front story, to fulfill them. Because that will be the whole reason for the quest.
Yes.
Use the past to stir up conflict in the present. You buttons to push, problems to solve, desires to forget or fulfill. And there are so many different ways that you can add contradiction throughout your story, but I just wanted to focus on these few ones because I feel like that's enough to get you going, especially like if you really focus on contradictory in your character and the dialogue, it's really going to set your manuscript and your story apart.
Well, and the nice thing to remember, I don't know if you haven't watched again, if you haven't watched the last episode on macro tension, watch that one and come back. But we talked about leaving a hook at the end of a chapter so that people want to keep reading. Micro tensions are the perfect way to leave a hook
Yes.
after most
Yes.
chapters because you can end the dialogue in tension. You can end a thought in tension. All of
Mhm.
these, you can add in an action, where something happens and it's not resolved right at the end of the chapter. It doesn't have to be a massive plot twisting hook to keep people reading. It's just these little micro tensions that come into play here that cause people to want to keep reading the next chapter.
That's what you want. You want to put enough macro tension and micro tension into your story that keep the reader turning those pages. Or
Yeah.
like me, trying to cover up the bottom so they don't
Yeah.
like rush and see it and be like, oh, no, I spoiled it for myself. I was about to get there anyway. But that's what you want. You really want
Yes.
your readers to be so invested, kept such in suspense that they can't like almost not breathe until they know what's going to
Yes.
happen.
And I feel like we should have an episode at some point where we talk about mastering when we know we have sequel books that we're going to be writing, that hook end of things not being resolved and yet being
Yes.
resolved at the same time.
Yes.
That kind of tension where we give the reader some relief and yet there's more to come. Well, thank you for joining us, the Ink Mages, and hopefully this was really helpful for you. This, to me, is one of the hugest takeaways for being a good writer is tension, whether it's macro or micro. It is going to improve your writing miles if you can just master the idea of continually having tension in every chapter of your story all throughout. It will keep people turning the page, will keep them invested in your story, and like we said earlier, it will humanize your characters so that people who are reading will really relate. If you haven't noticed, both Stephanie and I are wearing our fabulous hats, the Once and Future Chronicles and the Iron Kingdom series. We have swag shops. So if you haven't checked them out, please do. You can definitely get all of the fun t-shirts, sweatshirts, cups, and hats that help represent our books. And I have a book release coming up soon, June 21st. My third book is coming out. So look forward to that. And we will have more interviews coming for you soon. And leave us a like, leave us a comment. Let us know what kind of episodes you would like to see, what kind of tips, maybe what kind of stories you'd like to see us read and break down. We would love to have those discussions with you. And we're excited for what's coming next, and we'll see you next time.